What would you do if you were a billionaire who noticed dark, violent bruises on the arms of your pregnant maid? Most would mind their business. But Oliver didn't. What started as a simple question unraveled a terrifying conspiracy that would ultimately change both of their lives forever. The sprawling Collins estate in upstate New York was a fortress of glass steel and imported Italian marble. To the outside world, it was the architectural crown jewel of Oliver Collins, a 42-year-old tech mogul who had built an empire on cybersecurity software. But to 26-year-old Naira Foster, it was simply a sanctuary. Naira was 6 months pregnant. Her beautiful, deep melanin skin was usually glowing, but lately an exhaustion had settled into her cheekbones, leaving her eyes looking hollow. She had been working at the estate for 4 months, hired by the strict but fair house manager, Mrs. Gable. The job paid impeccably well, far above industry standards, with comprehensive health care that Naira desperately needed for her unborn child. Every day, she meticulously dusted the expansive library, polished the antique brass fittings, and kept her head down. She was a ghost in a house of immense wealth, exactly how she preferred it. Oliver Collins rarely interacted with the household staff. He wasn't arrogant. He was simply consumed by his work. He spent his days in his home office, staring at streams of code and taking international conference calls. He was a man trained to see anomalies, to spot the one line of malicious code hidden in millions of lines of programming. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when their worlds violently collided. Oliver had stepped into the Grand Library, looking for a specific first-edition book he needed for a reference. The room was dim, illuminated only by the grey light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Nera was there, standing on a low wooden step stool, reaching up to dust the higher shelves. She was wearing her standard grey uniform, which had been let out at the waist to accommodate her growing belly. As Oliver walked in, his sudden presence startled her. Naira gasped, her foot slipping on the polished wood of the stool. She didn't fall, but she lurched awkwardly, her arms flailing as she caught herself against the heavy oak bookshelf. In the chaotic movement, the long sleeve of her uniform snagged on a brass hinge and pushed up past her elbow. Oliver stepped forward instantly. "Careful, are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mr. Collins. So sorry I didn't hear you come in." Naira stammered, her voice trembling slightly as she quickly moved to yank her sleeve back down. But Oliver's eyes, trained to catch the smallest discrepancies, had already seen it. Before she could cover her arm, the dim light caught a horrific constellation of bruises marring her rich, dark skin. They were deep purple, fading into sickly shades of yellow and green at the edges. But it wasn't just a bruise. It was a pattern. 4 distinct oval-shaped marks on one side of her forearm and a larger thumb-shaped mark on the other. It was a handprint. Someone had grabbed her with terrifying, bone-crushing force. Oliver stopped dead in his tracks. The silence in the library became suffocating. He looked from her arm to her face. Naira was staring at the floor, her breathing shallow, her hands visibly shaking as she clutched the dusting cloth. "Who did that to you?" Oliver asked, his voice low, lacking his usual corporate detachment. Naira didn't look up. I tripped, sir. Last night, I bumped into the doorframe in my apartment. I'm clumsy." "A doorframe doesn't leave fingerprints." "Naira," Oliver said gently, but with a firm edge of authority. "It's nothing, Mr. Collins. Truly. Please don't worry yourself." She whispered, a tear escaping her eye and tracking down her cheek. She stepped off the stool, clearly desperate to escape the room. "If you need the library, I can come back later to finish." Oliver watched her back as she practically fled the room. He knew the look of a trapped animal. Before he became a billionaire, Oliver had grown up in the rougher neighborhoods of South Boston. He had seen domestic violence. He knew that pushing her right now would only make her close up tighter or worse. Make her quit. If she quit, she would lose the only safe haven and income she had. He walked over to the window, watching the rain batter the glass. He couldn't just fire her. He couldn't just call the police either. In his experience, calling the authorities without a victim's cooperation often escalated the danger at home. The abuser would post bail and return infinitely angrier. Oliver needed facts. He needed data. He pulled out his phone and dialed a private number. "Dylan," Oliver said when his head of security answered. "I need a discreet background check on one of the housekeepers, Naira Foster. Look into her domestic situation, spouse's boyfriend's family. I want to know exactly who she goes home to every night." Dylan Mitchell was an ex-intelligence officer who ran Collins's security like a military operation. It took him less than 24 hours to compile a dossier. The next evening, Dylan walked into Oliver's private study, dropping a thick manila folder onto the mahogany desk. His expression was grim. "You were right to be concerned, boss," Dylan said, crossing his arms. "But it's worse than just a bad domestic situation. It's a massive security liability." Oliver frowned, opening the folder. The first page featured a photograph of a man with cold eyes and a hardened jaw. "Who is this Derek Langston?" Dylan replied. "Naira's husband. They've been married for 3 years. On paper, he's a freelance contractor. In reality, he's a degenerate gambler with a rap sheet for aggravated assault and extortion. But here is where it gets complicated for us." Dylan tapped a glossy photograph near the back of the file. It was a still image taken from one of the estate's hidden perimeter cameras, dated 3 days ago. It showed Naira standing near the service gate, crying. Derek was gripping her arm, the exact spot where Oliver had seen the bruises. But he wasn't just hurting her. He was holding a small black electronic device. "What is he holding?" Oliver asked, his stomach tightening. "It's an RFID cloner," Dylan said flatly. "I ran the logs from the service gate. Derek isn't just abusing his pregnant wife, Oliver. He's trying to force her to clone her staff access badge. He's $250,000 in debt to a very dangerous local syndicate. From the chatter my contacts picked up, Derek has promised them a massive payday to wipe his slate clean." Oliver leaned back in his leather chair, the pieces snapping together into a horrifying picture. "He wants to rob this estate." "Exactly. And he needs Naira to bypass the primary alarm systems. Her badge has access to the main house, the library, and the corridors leading to your private art collection, and the safe. He's been beating her, trying to break her down so she'll give him the security codes and the cloned badge." "If she gives it to him, she's an accomplice," Oliver murmured. If she doesn't, he might kill her," Dylan finished bluntly. "Given the syndicate he owes money to, they might kill both of them if he doesn't deliver." Oliver looked at the photograph of Naira crying at the gate. The weight of the situation settled heavily on his shoulders. She was a young black woman, about to bring a child into the world, trapped in a nightmare where every exit led to destruction. If she went to the police, she feared the Child Protective Services might deem her home unfit and take her baby. If she complied with Derek, she'd end up in federal prison. "We need to call the authorities," Dylan suggested. "Let the police handle Derek." "No," Oliver said sharply, his mind racing, formulating a plan. "If we call the cops, Derek will know Naira tipped us off. He's already pushed into a corner by this syndicate. A desperate man will do something catastrophic before the police can even build a case to arrest him. Plus, if he gets tipped off, he goes into hiding, and Naira will spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder." "So what do we do? We can't just let him breach the perimeter." "We aren't going to let him breach it," Oliver said, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the dossier. We are going to invite him in. Dylan raised an eyebrow. You want to set a trap. I want to eliminate the threat to Naira permanently, and I want to do it in a way that legally clears her of any wrongdoing, Oliver stated. He wants the access codes. We give him the access codes, but we dictate the terms of the engagement. Later that evening, Naira was wiping down the kitchen counters, moving sluggishly. Her back ached, and every time she breathed too deeply, her bruised ribs protested. Suddenly, her cheap burner phone vibrated in her apron pocket. She pulled it out, her blood running cold at the text message on the screen. Derek tomorrow night. 2 a.m. You leave the East Wing door unlocked and give me the alarm bypass, or I swear to God, Naira, I'll make sure you never get to hold that baby. Don't test me. A sob caught in her throat. She gripped the edge of the marble counter, feeling utterly defeated. She had tried to hold out, tried to protect Mr. Collins's home, but she couldn't risk her child. She typed back a trembling, "Okay." What Naira didn't know was that up in the security control room, Dylan Mitchell was watching her every move through the cameras, and he had just intercepted that exact text message. The board was set. The billionaire and the security chief were about to wage a silent war against a man who thought he held all the cards, but Oliver Collins hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by playing fair. He built it by destroying threats before they even knew they were under attack. The following morning, the Collins estate was cloaked in a thick, unyielding fog. Inside the grand kitchen, Naira stood paralyzed by the industrial sink, the burner phone burning a metaphorical hole in her apron pocket. She had barely slept her mind, trapped in a terrifying loop of worst-case scenarios. If Derek succeeded, her employer would be robbed of millions. If he failed, or if she locked him out, she and her unborn child would pay the ultimate price. Naira. She flinched violently, dropping the sponge into the soapy water. She spun around to find Oliver Collins standing in the doorway. He wasn't dressed in his usual sharp business suits. Instead, he wore a simple dark sweater and slacks, his demeanor remarkably calm. "Mr. Collins, I'm sorry, I was just—" "Leave the dishes," Oliver interrupted gently. "Walk with me to the conservatory. We need to talk." Naira's heart plummeted into her stomach. He knows she thought panic constricting her throat. He checked the cameras. He saw the text. "He's going to fire me, or worse, have me arrested." Her hands shook so violently, she had to clasp them tightly across her swollen belly. She followed him in agonizing silence, the long walk down the marble hallway, feeling like a march to the gallows. The conservatory was a lush green haven of exotic plants and towering glass windows. Oliver gestured to a plush wicker chair. "Please sit down." Naira sank into the chair, unable to meet his gaze. "Mr. Collins, whatever you think I've done." "I know about Derek," Oliver said, softly, cutting through the heavy air. Naira froze. The air left her lungs in a sharp gasp. Oliver sat opposite her, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "I know he's your husband. I know about his gambling debts to Vincent Russo's syndicate. And I know about the ultimatum he gave you last night." Tears spilled over Naira's dark lashes, tracing the exhausted lines of her face. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. "I'm so sorry," she wept, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to. I swear to you I tried to say no. But he told me he would hurt my baby. I have nowhere to go. I have no one." "Look at me, Naira," Oliver commanded, his voice firm but laced with an undeniable warmth. Slowly she lowered her hands. "You are not going to prison, and Derek is never going to lay a hand on you or your child ever again." Oliver stated, his eyes locking onto hers with absolute certainty. "But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Naira blinked, stunned by the absolute lack of anger in his voice. I don't understand. He's coming tonight, at 2 a.m. He's going to rob you." "He's going to try," Oliver corrected, a cold, calculated glint in his eye. "Dylan and I have been monitoring his communications. We know his plan. We know he's bringing 2 of Russo's enforcers with him, and we are going to let them walk right through the front door." Naira's eyes widened in horror. "But they have guns. They're dangerous men. I am well aware of how dangerous they are, which is why we aren't leaving anything to chance," Oliver explained. He pulled a sleek silver keycard from his pocket and placed it on the glass table between them. "Tonight you are going to reply to Derek. You will tell him that the security protocols were updated and a simple bypass code won't work. Tell him you managed to steal a master access card from my office." "But won't they know it's a trap? Derek is arrogant and desperate. Desperate men don't question their good luck," Oliver replied. "This card will grant them access through the East Wing door exactly as he requested. It will open the corridors leading to the basement vaults, where I keep the private art collection." "You're just going to give them your art?" Naira asked, bewildered. "No." Oliver smiled grimly. "Because the vault they are walking into isn't the art vault. It's a reinforced, climate-controlled server room that we completely emptied this morning. It has walls made of 6-inch reinforced steel and an acoustic seal. Once they step inside, the door will lock behind them. They won't be able to shoot their way out, and they won't be able to call for backup because the room is a Faraday cage. Cell signals drop dead the second the door shuts." Naira stared at him, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of what he was doing. A billionaire tech mogul was orchestrating a high-stakes sting operation in his own home, all to protect a maid he barely knew. "Why?" Naira whispered, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this for me? You could have just fired me." Oliver's expression softened. "Because nobody stepped in for my mother when I was a kid," he said quietly, a shadow passing over his face. "I promised myself a long time ago that if I ever had the power to stop a monster, I wouldn't look the other way. You and your baby deserve a life free from fear, Naira. Tonight we give you that." The rest of the day was a blur of meticulously orchestrated movements. Following Oliver's instructions, Naira sent the text to Derek. The reply was instantaneous and chillingly brief. "Good girl. Have the card at the door." At 1 a.m., Dylan Mitchell escorted Naira to a secure panic room on the 3rd floor of the estate. It was stocked with food-water blankets and a direct video feed to the security room. "You stay here," Dylan instructed, his tone protective. "No matter what you hear, you do not open this door until Mr. Collins or I come to get you." Down in the subterranean security hub, Oliver and Dylan sat before a wall of glowing monitors. The estate was completely dark, silent as a tomb. Outside, a heavy storm had rolled in rain, lashing against the stone walls, and thunder masking the sound of approaching footsteps. At exactly 1:56 a.m., one of the perimeter sensors blinked red. "Here we go," Dylan muttered, typing furiously on his keyboard. 3 heat signatures, moving through the tree line near the east wing. Oliver leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the high-definition night vision cameras. 3 figures, clad in black tactical gear, emerged from the shadows. The man in the lead, holding a silenced pistol, was unmistakable even in the dark. Derek Langston. Derek approached the side door. He reached into the prearranged dead drop behind a stone planter and pulled out the silver keycard Naira had left for him. He swiped it against the reader. A tiny green light blinked. The heavy oak door clicked open. Derek grinned, motioning for the two syndicate enforcers to follow him. Like rats entering a maze, they stepped into the Collins estate completely unaware that the maze had been designed specifically to trap them. "They're in," Dylan said, his fingers hovering over a master control panel, tracking them through Corridor C. On the monitors, Derek and the two men moved swiftly and silently through the luxurious hallways. They were heavily armed, carrying canvas duffel bags meant to carry out millions of dollars in stolen paintings and artifacts. Derek led the way, following the fake map Naira had been instructed to text him earlier that evening. "He's taking the bait perfectly," Oliver observed, his voice devoid of emotion. "Route them toward Sector 4. Dylan tapped a few keys. Deep within the house, hidden automated doors seamlessly slid shut, blocking off access to the main living quarters and subtly funneling the intruders down a single predetermined path. Derek paused at a heavy steel door at the end of a long concrete hallway. Above it, a discreet plaque read, "Secure Storage Vault A." "This is it," Derek whispered, his voice captured perfectly by the hidden microphones embedded in the ceiling. He swiped the silver keycard again. The heavy steel door hissed open, revealing a dark, expansive room. The three men hurried inside, clicking on heavy-duty flashlights, sweeping the beams across the space, expecting to see priceless canvases and gold. Instead, their flashlights illuminated bare concrete walls and empty metal racks. "What the hell is this?" one of the syndicate men growled, turning toward Derek. "It's empty. Where's the art?" Derek looked around, confusion morphing into panic. "I don't know. She said it was here. The stupid bitch must have given me the wrong room." Before he could finish his sentence, a loud hydraulic clang echoed through the space. The massive steel door slammed shut behind them. Derek rushed to the door, pounding his fists against the immovable metal. "Hey, open up!" He grabbed his radio, but all he heard was the hiss of dead static. The Faraday cage was active. They were completely cut off from the world. Suddenly, the glaring, clinical white lights of the room snapped on, blinding them. Oliver's voice boomed from the hidden intercom speakers, echoing off the concrete walls with the force of a judge delivering a sentence. "Good evening, Derek." Derek flinched, looking up at the cameras mounted in the corners of the room. "Who is that Collins? Open this door, or I swear to God I'll rip your whole house apart." "You aren't in a position to make threats," Oliver's voice replied smoothly. "You are currently locked inside a Class 5 reinforced server vault. The walls are bulletproof, and the air supply is controlled from my security desk. But more importantly, every word you've spoken and every threat you've made to your wife over the past month has been documented and handed over to Detective James Bennett of the State Police." Derek's face went pale. The two syndicate men turned their weapons toward Derek, realizing instantly they had been led into a trap by a dead man walking. "The police are waiting at the front gates as we speak," Oliver continued. "They have your extortion texts. They have the footage of your domestic abuse. And now they have you dead to rights for armed breaking and entering. You're looking at 20 years, Derek. Minimum." Inside the panic room, Naira watched the feed on her monitor. She saw the realization wash over Derek's face, the absolute crushing defeat. The monster who had terrorized her, who had bruised her skin and broken her spirit, was suddenly reduced to a trapped rat pacing frantically in a cage. She let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 3 years. She placed a protective hand over her stomach, feeling her baby kick strongly against her palm. Downstairs, the red and blue lights of half a dozen police cruisers broke through the foggy night. Detective Bennett and his tactical team moved in, coordinated by Dylan Mitchell. When the vault door finally hissed open, Derek and the two enforcers were on their knees, hands on their heads, having realized fighting was entirely futile. As Derek was being led out in handcuffs, He locked eyes with Oliver, who was standing quietly in the hallway, his hands in his pockets. "She's my wife," Derek spat, viciously struggling against the officers. "You can't keep me away from her. When I get out." "When you get out," Oliver interrupted his voice, dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper, "you will be an old man. And if you ever even think of looking in her direction, I will ruin whatever pathetic fraction of a life you have left. Take him away." The next few weeks brought a whirlwind of change to the Collins estate. With the mountain of evidence Oliver and Dylan had compiled, Derek was denied bail, the syndicate furious at the botched job, and the police attention cut all ties with him, leaving him to face the full wrath of the justice system alone. Naira didn't return to dusting the library. A month after the incident, Oliver called her into his office. He had a thick stack of legal documents resting on his desk. "Mr. Collins, I wanted to thank you again." Naira started feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. "I'm looking for a new apartment this week. I don't want to overstay my welcome here at the estate." "You aren't going anywhere unless you want to," Oliver said. He pushed a folder toward her. "I've spoken with my human resources director at Collins Tech. I noticed you were taking online courses in data analytics before you married Derek. Is that correct?" Naira nodded, surprised. "Yes, sir. I had to drop out when things got bad." "Well, I'm setting up a trust for your child's education," Oliver said casually, as if he were discussing the weather. "And as for you, I don't need a maid. I need a junior data analyst in my cybersecurity division. The starting salary is triple what you're making now with full maternity leave. You can stay in the guest cottage on the estate until you're ready to buy your own home." Naira stared at the contract, tears of overwhelming joy spilling down her cheeks. "Oliver, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to repay you." "You already have," Oliver smiled. "You proved that even in the darkest circumstances, courage exists. Now go take care of that baby." 3 months later, Naira gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy named Miles. She stood on the balcony of her new home, a beautiful sunlit townhouse she had bought herself, holding her son close to her chest. The bruises on her arms had long since faded, replaced by the warm, glowing strength of a woman who had survived the storm. She was no longer a ghost in the background. She was a mother, a professional, and a survivor, entirely visible and undeniably free. If this story of Naira's incredible resilience and Oliver's genius trap kept you on the edge of your seat, like, share, and subscribe right now. It proves that sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear capes. They use resources to uplift those in the shadows. What would you have done in Oliver's shoes? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the notification bell for more thrilling real-life dramas.